The Pittsburgh Steelers draft class is being celebrated, but how different were the moves that led to it and the setup that they put in by the Steelers front office compared to previous years under Kevin Colbert? We'll analyze that as well as the versatility that they're seeking to create for themselves on both sides of the ball. I'm Chris Carter, your host of the North Shore Drive podcast. And we're going to be joined by Ray Fittipaldo talking Steelers. And we'll also have Jason Mackey talking about the Buccos, who did snap the losing streak, but still need to get some work done to fix their losing ways. All that and more here on North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Let's get into it.
You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter.
Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting app and especially on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed it on YouTube. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of our Monday, Wednesday, and Friday episodes, as well as our daily content that comes out on all different sports topics from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And if you want all our written content, as well as everything else we do, go to post-gazette.com and subscribe today to get all of our content on sports and everything else we cover in Pittsburgh. As I said before, we're joined by Ray Fittipaldo, one of our great Steelers beat writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Ray, I want to talk to you about a topic that we've heard a lot about, kind of just from fans, from people talking about the Steelers draft, because this was the first official draft that Omar Khan was running. Andy Weidel was there, and there was a lot of talk about Omar Khan. He's so aggressive. Omar Khan, he's the con man, and that things are changing, and that Kevin Colbert wouldn't have made these types of moves. But our buddy Brian Batko, who will join us on Friday on the North Shore Drive podcast, wrote a piece about how, yes, it's a new regime, but there were a lot of the same tendencies, and kind of looking at some realism about it. People talked about Broderick Jones and trading up to get him. The Steelers wouldn't have done that before, but in the earlier days of the the Kevin Colbert era, they did trade up. They traded up to get Troy Polamalu. They traded up to get Santonio Holmes. And even recently, they traded up to get Devin Bush, who didn't work out, but still was an aggressive move, and even more aggressive move considering they moved up 10 spots instead of 3 spots this past year. So I say all that to say, are things actually like significantly different here for the Steelers front office, or are there just some kind of tweaks here and there with the same ideas really just being locked in place?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just tweaks here and there. I think, for whatever reason, Kevin Colbert didn't address the offensive and defensive fronts in his final few years of the draft, and I think it's been up to Andy and Omar to straighten that out. But as far as the other thing goes, the other stuff goes, making trades and that sort of stuff. I think they both showed aggression. Obviously, Omar in his first season making those decisions, and Kevin did it throughout his career. So, I think probably more so it's just some little things here and there that are different. I think the biggest thing was, and Andy and Mike talked about this within the last week or so, it was just getting on the same page. When Andy and the new scouts were hired, they sat down at June minicamp last year. So not rookie minicamp in May, but June minicamp. All of the scouts and the new scouts were in place, and they all got into a room with Mike Tomlin, and Mike Tomlin went over what types of players he wants, what types of athletes, what types of people. And I think, what Andy said was they got their marching orders, and then when they hit the road in August and September, going to games and going to campuses, they had a full understanding of what Steelers look like, so they knew what they were looking for. And what Andy said was it was really, kind of a seamless transition for all, because the communication was open, and they knew exactly what Mike wanted.
It certainly seemed that way. Keanu Benton kind of revealed on his first call, after he was drafted, that Mike Tomlin brought up the word goon when he was talking to him, because he wanted physical players. And now goon not meaning like, guys who hurt people or guys that are dirty, but it just means guys who are willing to get their hands dirty at the line of scrimmage. They're willing to be more physical. They make a point to win at the point of attack and to dominate their opponent in front of them. And you look at this draft class, Broderick Jones, Joey Porter Jr., even at cornerback, the way that he tries to jam receivers at the line of scrimmage with physical play, Keanu Benton on the defensive line, and even Darnell Washington as a blocker, that's very much, and I even say Nick Herbig kind of fits that mold. This is kind of a draft class that very much fits the idea of getting goons, getting physical guys, and playing this kind of physical brand of football that Mike Tomlin has set them out to find.
Yeah, I mean, just going back to Kevin Colbert's last couple of years, they didn't take an offensive lineman in the first round since 2012, didn't take a defensive lineman in the first round since 2011. And even in the second round, the highest they would take a guy was Tuitt back in 2014. He came in the second round. So it's hard to maintain dominant lines of scrimmage when you're counting on third, fourth, undrafted free agent types, to fill in those gaps. And, let's be honest, Kendrick Green was a bad pick. Kevin Dotson, I would say Kevin Dotson's going to be a backup this year. I mean, that was for a fourth round pick. I guess you could say that's average. I don't see any way for him coming back on a second contract. But, the point is that you don't usually find starters beyond the third or the fourth round. I mean, you got to get those hosses early, those guys who are going to be cornerstones of your lines of scrimmage. And the Steelers just didn't do that in the final decade. They took some shots, Kendrick Green and some others, middle rounds, but it just didn't work out. And they were almost forced to do it this year. And I know, Mike Tomlin said they weren't forced to do anything because of what they did in free agency. But when they made that move, you knew what they were making that move for. That move was to go up and to get Broderick Jones.
Absolutely. And it was an emphasis to say, hey, let's get it right on the offensive line. Let's go get our guy. And one thing that, I thought was very interesting, another point that Brian analyzed in his piece, by the way, go read Brian's piece. It's called Analysis Steelers have a new regime, but many of the same draft tendencies. And one of the tendencies that he noticed was that it's a continuation of something that we've always seen, is that the Steelers prefer guys to come to their facility, and those are the guys that they usually draft and guys that they visit on their pro days, because this is now 8 straight times the Steelers have selected somebody that they've gone and visited with their top brass at their pro day. And there were 4 guys on this that the Steelers did both for visiting their draft, their pro day, and then bringing them in for a pre-draft visit. One of them was Broderick Jones. The other was Joey Porter Jr. Another was Darnell Washington. And I think the other was Brian Brzee. But 3 of the 4 guys that they both brought in for a pre-draft visit and were visited by Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan at their pro draft guys were their draft picks. Keanu Benton was the only guy, and he was still a top 30 visit. So you're talking about all 4 of their first picks in the first 3 rounds were all brought in for top 30 visits, and 3 of those 4 were guys that they went and visited with the top brass, and usually that's done at the bigger schools that they normally look to draw in their talent from. And I think it shows that while yes, there was a change in emphasis in what positions were looked at this year compared to recent years as their top options, but these are the practices to get there, at least on the side that we can see, were very much similar to what Kevin Colbert was doing.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, you want to make sure, right? Like when you're investing thousands upon thousands of dollars into the scouting process, and you do that in numerous ways, time in the office, looking at tape, time on the road, on campuses, talking with coaches, at stadiums, getting the nitty-gritty details of these prospects. If you're going to put that amount of money into it, you might as well bring your top targets in for visits as well, right? Get them on the whiteboard, get to know them a little bit better. I think it only makes sense. Now, this was probably more than they've had in the past. I think the average, I went back and looked at this before the draft. I think the average is about 2 guys who visit, get drafted. But, this year it was double that. And, I don't know if it has anything to do with the new regime or, Mike Tomlin in particular, but I just think it makes total sense that if you're going to spend those types of resources, you better double down and double check everything about these guys before you invest one of those high draft picks in them.
I agree entirely. I want to talk about a piece that you wrote, though, that talked about the versatility that the Steelers have been looking to add to both sides of the ball with the changing games in the NFL. We'll do that in just a minute here on the North Shore Drive podcast, so don't go anywhere. But first, before we do any of that, I want to talk to you guys about our great sponsors at GameTime.co. Buying tickets for your favorite events shouldn't be stressful, and GameTime is the app that's here to make things fast and easy to buy tickets for all events, whether they're sports, music, comedy, or theater near you. They give you killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee so that you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you're about to have at your favorite event. The Game Time app, which you download right to your phone and mobile device, allows you to book tickets up to the last minute, even if you didn't plan far out in advance. Sometimes if you wait too long, you feel, man, those tickets are going to be way too expensive. Well, not with Game Time. Game Time is going to give you exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and much, much more. The Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. That's the Game Time guarantee. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account, and you can use code PITT, all capital letters on all one word, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase of $150 or more. Or go to their website, gametime.co. Terms and conditions apply. Create an account and redeem code PITT, all capital letters, all one word, and you'll get $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We're sticking with Ray Fittipaldo for one more segment before we switch to the Buccos. Now, Ray, you wrote about versatility the other day, and we talked a little bit about this on the Monday episode, but I wanted to kind of revisit this just to talk about some of the talking points that you nailed in there, and the importance of finding guys who can fill multiple roster spots. Now, you know, when we listen to Mike Tomlin talk about it, when he said, like, when we're talking about versatility, he says, I like guys who do multiples. And that's kind of just his way of saying versatility and guys who can fill different roles, because you still only get 53 guys on an active roster that you can, that you can have, even less guys who can be active on game day. So it behooves you to find guys who can fill multiple roster spots. And this isn't necessarily saying finding a receiver who can play cornerback, but finding a linebacker who can play outside and inside, and then also help on special teams, finding a cornerback who can play slot and outside and help on special teams. And I think special teams is a big part of that. And you highlighted how that was something that's probably going to be looked at for both the 4th round pick, Nick Herbig, and especially the 7th round pick, Corey Trice, the cornerback that they got.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I think both of those guys have what you're looking for to be really good special teams players. I mean, you listen to the coaches talk about Nick Herbig, and he's got those intangibles, loves footballs, you know, guy who's going to run down on kicks and establish himself on the roster in that way. And I think Corey Trice, with his size, you know, he's one of the biggest corners who came out in this year's draft. I think he could play on a number of special teams as well if he ends up making the 53-man roster, which I think, you know, the way they're structured, I think he's going to have every opportunity to do that. So that's when you're a 4th round pick or even a 3rd round pick and later, that's how you have to establish yourself.
Yep.
And I think, you know, we saw that in years past with outside linebackers. Anthony Chickillo was a 6th round pick, you know, got on the roster, special teams, then eventually became that top backup. And I think that's going to be Nick Herbig's path to playing time as well. You know, they're going to start him on the outside. That's the position room he'll be in to start his career on Friday when he gets there in the kickoff rookie minicamp. But they firmly believe with his skill set, with his athleticism, that he can play some off-the-ball linebacker too. And we all know that they didn't address that really other than in free agency. They did not take an off-the-ball linebacker in this draft. Wasn't a very good draft for that. So they'll get Nick Herbig in there. They'll take a look at him and they'll see what his skill set is. And then they'll decide, you know, later in the summer if he can have a role on the defense as an off-ball linebacker as well.
Now, one thing that they also didn't really address in the draft was slot cornerback. And yes, they did sign a guy in Chandon Sullivan, the former Viking / Packer / Bear. Basically, he made a whole tour of the NFC North. But they brought a guy in like that to help with, you know, Arthur Marlette in that spot. But Corey Trice is 6'3". He's if he's going to be helping in the slot, it's going to be kind of more of like a big safety type of role, in my opinion, just with the skill set that he has. I kind of look at that. Is that a position where you still see as somewhere that Omar Khan's going to maybe make a move to address at some point, if you feel like they haven't already addressed it enough by getting Sullivan?
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll take a look at Sullivan, and I don't think there's any guarantees that he'll be on the 53-man roster in September. But obviously, they got 4 months to 3.5 months to look at him and see what they have. I think the bigger point in all of this, Chris, is it's very much a specialized game in the NFL right now. You need certain types of players for all different kinds of situations. And, you mentioned a big guy to defend tight ends. You definitely need that. And maybe Corey Trice can be that guy, but there's also a need for, that 5'9", 5'10" slot corner who can stick with those shifty slot receivers and hang with those guys. When it's 3rd and 6 and they need to cover them up, they can cover them up. And I don't know that's Corey Trice's skill set. He's more of a press man corner, disrupt at the line of scrimmage more so than quick change of direction guy. So, we'll see if Sullivan can handle those duties. But if you're looking at, there's probably a couple of spots that they might have to address before September gets here. But if you're looking at one, I would say a cover slot corner. Millette is good. He's good in his role, but he's not a cover guy that you want out there, on 3rd and 6 or 3rd and 7 or really 3rd and anything.
Yeah, no, I agree. He's more of a guy. And one thing I think Arthur Millette brings outside of just his skills on the field is he does bring tenacity. He does bring focus. Arthur Millette's a guy, like, when the Steelers were struggling, he was a voice in the locker room, even for, he's not a playmaker. He's not a guy that's going to be high up on the list of, the depth chart and everything. And when you think of Steelers stars, you're not thinking of Arthur Millette, but he was a guy that was like, hey, we got to snap out of this because we want to finish this season strong. And you guys reported on that for the Post-Gazette, talking about, how he was trying to step up as a leader when he's more of a role player for the Steelers. And to me, that's important just as well as making plays, is how do you fit into the locker room? And I agree that, Arthur Millette, not the cover guy that you want, but he could come downhill, make those types of plays. So that's why I think it's going to be interesting is, do the Steelers make this extra effort if Chandon Sullivan isn't the guy who's the cover slot corner that they think fits well for them? Do they make the extra effort to find somebody else, or do they try to fit someone that's already on their roster into that role? Say maybe if they try to put, one of the other cornerbacks, James Pierre has been a guy that's fit multiple roles for them. Do they try him there? They haven't tried him there yet, as far as I've seen over the past few years. Or is that Corey Trice's role or someone else's?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't been told this, but it seems like there's maybe been a change in philosophy and how they want to cover, right? By going out and getting these bigger types of corners. Maybe there's going to be a change in philosophy. Maybe they're going to play a different way. I mean, I don't know that smaller cover corner is is no longer a big deal in the league. I think it is, but if you look at it, Chris, you lose Mike Hilton a couple of years ago. Now you lose Cam Sutton, who played in that role a lot at the end of last season. I think you need a guy like that on your roster. And hey, maybe they really like Sullivan, and maybe we're underselling him a bit. Maybe he's going to end up being that guy. But, I think in the end, even though you do get bigger and you're going to probably play more press man on the outside, and that doesn't mean you have to stay in man. You could pass that off and play zone behind it. But even if you're going to play that way, I still think there's a need for a smaller corner who can maybe, as I said, cover up some of those quick guys over the middle of the field when you need to, especially on those 3rd and medium types of plays.
Absolutely. Those are definitely some of the plays that I think are going to be really interesting. And it kind of matches up also with the Steelers not going and getting a linebacker, because on some of those 3rd and medium plays, that's where you'd be asking a linebacker to step in and make plays to help in coverage. So that could be an overlapping thing where maybe the Steelers can find somebody who can fit both roles at some point. That's a very unique thing. And as we talk about versatility, maybe that's the one last piece of a versatile player that they want to add to their roster. We'll see if they do that in the coming weeks here. He's Ray Fittipaldo. And thank you, Ray, for all your insights that you always give us here on the North Shore Drive podcast. rookie camp starts this Friday. So we'll get to see all the Steelers rookies, not just the draft picks, but all the undrafted free agents and the camp visits that they've invited, and see how those guys fare as we start getting ready for OTAs and mini camp here throughout the spring and early part of summer covering the Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, he's Ray Fittipaldo. We'll also have Brian Batko on Friday. But before we do any of that, we do got to switch to baseball. Jason Mackey going to be talking Pirates in just a minute here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Stick with us. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We'll be right back. We're back here in the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, joined today by Jason Mackey, our esteemed Pirates beat reporter. He's at PNC Park right now because he's getting ready for an afternoon game as the Pirates finish their series with the Rockies. A chance to win the series after they lost 7 straight. But there was a really good sign. Before we get into the 10-1 drubbing that they took the other day, I want to get into Mitch Keller's big complete game shutout performance, because you don't always get those in baseball. It hasn't come too often for the Pirates either. But man, Mitch Keller looked on fire in that game, and of course Sheldon giving him the chance to finish there. Jason, what did you see from Mitch that helped him play so well?
Chris, I've seen a lot of Mitch Keller starts over the years. This was obviously numero uno. I don't think it's a big reach to say that. He was absolutely incredible. What I saw from Keller, honestly, is his ability to use multiple fastballs really wherever he wants. His velocity was up. You could tell that was just one of the starts that he was absolutely feeling it. It's so funny. Mitch Keller a couple years ago, I mean, even as recently as the beginning of last season, was basically like a one fastball guy, like threw a four-seamer that they thought was too straight. Well, he's turned that into a sinker. He's turned that into a bit of a cutter. He's playing with the slider differently. This is a legitimate 6-pitch guy who throws like 96, 97 when he wants to. Great curveball. The changeup has come a long way. It's not even fair. He was absolutely incredible. And you have these starts every so often, and every pitcher in the major league level has them. Every pitcher everywhere has them, where the ball goes where you want. And you have velocity, you feel free and easy. If every start could be like that, it would be the greatest game in the world. But I mean, Mitch just had all of the good stuff the other night. I've never seen him more pinpoint with control, what he wanted to do. Honestly, Chris, from a writer's perspective, it was kind of a difficult story to write. Like, obviously you wanted to write Keller. There was no offense until Rodolfo Castro's home run in the 7th. And then right after that, it was like Mitch Keller, 5 minutes, and the Rockies were done. It was great because it was quick, but it was tough because it was quick too.
Right. It is tough, but let's switch to the bats here, because man, it's been the struggle bus for quite some time. You look back in their 7-game losing streak, they never scored more than 2 runs, and they still haven't scored more than 2 runs. Mitch Keller's awesome pitching performance is the only reason they've really broken it. They, of course, lost 10-1 to the Rockies on Tuesday. Again, 12:35 first pitch time for the Rockies on Wednesday. But Jason, what do they got to fix here? And especially, I want to get to the shortstop at part of this soon, but what do they got to fix here to get this lineup back to what they were doing earlier?
Yeah, and I think the fix is a little bit of what I wrote about today. We'll get into that, Chris, with O'Neill Cruz. But what they need to fix right now, a lot of things. Hitting with runners in scoring position has been abysmal. The Pirates, let's not forget, before this current slide, were basically one of the top 3 teams hitting with runners in scoring position, depending on how you want to define it. But they did it regularly. They're not doing it at all right now. It's, a buck and change basically is their average with risk. It's been bad. They need big hits. I mean, there was a situation last night. Carlos Santana comes up with the bases loaded, huge opportunity, a place where the Pirates had previously converted, flies out the left field. So that's one part. The other part I would say is getting on base more. One of the things we saw the Pirates do early on was steal a lot of bases, put pressure on the other team. I think they're kind of forcing it right now, but a way you cannot get on base more. Get on base more. If you're close, if you're playing with a lead, you can put that stuff into play. Now they have such few opportunities, and they're still trying to do something with them. They're a lot more expected. And then when they go awry, which sometimes they're going to, it's a lot more costly. So get on base more, have to do that. This is not a team that's going to outslug anybody. They said that early on, and that's fine. But get on base, steal some bases, put pressure on the other team, run the bases well, hit in key situations. it's unfortunate over the past 9 games or whatever it is, they've just done none of those things.
Yeah, it is unfortunate because you'd think that they'd be able to, if they were even just able to do a little bit of that, they'd be able to get the bullpen active, because the bullpen, you know, at one point had the most saves in baseball. They're still tied for second with the Angels, but they can't even really do much because they don't have a lead to protect, and it's because the bats aren't getting active. But let's go to the part that you truly analyzed really well with your article. Absence of O'Neill Cruz felt as Pirates lack offense and clear solution at shortstop. We all knew that there would be at some point be a feeling of missing a dynamic player like O'Neill Cruz at shortstop, but it seems now it's really shining through. And now it's been a month since he's been injured now.
Yeah, it's been a month, basically exactly a month. So 3 to go. And it's felt all over, Chris. It really is. I mean, the easy part is to talk about the offense and, talk about, like one swing can change a game, that sort of dynamic. That's O'Neill Cruz's wheelhouse, right? Like, how good would it feel right now to see O'Neill Cruz putting one in the river and the entire complexion of the game change? Everybody's step is a little bit lighter at that point. I also look at it from a defensive standpoint, where they haven't found a natural fix or a natural placeholder to hold down the job. Like, Rodolfo Castro has been good at times offensively. He has largely struggled defensively. He certainly had his moments, but leads the team in errors, has not looked comfortable there. Tucupita Marcano has been a little bit better defensively. I'm not blaming the situation on him last night where he doesn't catch the ball from Santana. It hits Elias Diaz's hand. But like, you watch him, it's not great. He's hitting 234. Like, he's not a solution. They bring up Chris Owings. I think it was 2 days ago now. I mean, I like Owings' defense. It's fine. It's reliable. It reminds me of like Clint Barmas with the Pirates' previous playoff team, which, again, I would take right now. Like, Chris Owings would be in there most days for me, but they need O'Neill Cruz. They miss O'Neill Cruz. Like, he got better defensively. His offense is game-changing. They need the type of thing that he can provide. So, yeah, it's been a tough go without him for sure.
It seems like one of those things where there's no hiding it, like I'm not sure. Are there things the Pirates can do to mitigate this? Because again, we're talking about still months until he'd even be able to be thought about coming back. And these are again, April was great, and they bought themselves space to kind of deal with some slumps and hang on. Heck, they're still in first in their division by half a game heading into their game at 12:35. But are there things they can do that could kind of narrow down, like, hey, yes, you can't just replace O'Neill Cruz, but can they do things to kind of make it so that it's not as big of an impact?
Yeah, they can, and they can get more production from certain guys. Like Jack Sawinski was really, really good as recently as about 10 days ago, and he's gone quiet outside of one home run. They can get more from him. There's definitely more in there. Connor Joe was one of the best hitters in baseball early on. I mean, they can't reasonably expect him to be top 10 in OPS, but he's been a little bit quiet. I suppose you could expect more out of him. Andrew McCutchen was really good early on. Has been kind of quiet since. You saw him get an RBI last night, but I mean, I think there's certainly another level he can get to. So, I mean, it's not going to be any one player. It can't be any one player. O'Neill Cruz is such a freak, and what part of what I like so much about Cruz and what he adds to the lineup is just the sudden change dynamic. I hear college football teams talk about sudden change.
I know what you mean.
First four. It's sort of the same deal, right? Like, you're down 3-1 and feeling like crap. Well, there's 2 guys on base. O'Neill Cruz takes one swing, and now you got a lead. That when things are going as poorly as they are right now is very important in my mind. And you can't find another guy who can do the things that he can do.
I agree with that entirely. But let's look forward here. The Pirates finish up with their series here with the Rockies, 12:35. Rich Hill on the mound. This show will probably come out like a little bit before first pitch. But what do you expect out of them finishing this series?
Boy, they really need Rich Hill to be good. I was just riding the elevator up with somebody, and we were talking about, man, what a loss would be, an exclamation point that you don't want to put on a crappy homestand. And I don't think you want that at all. You just had a crappy, trip to Tampa. DC was okay, albeit disjointed. You don't want to come back here and have this happen. And you got the Orioles this weekend. The Orioles are really good.
Yeah.
They're basically like right below the Rays. And so you want to get this one. You need to get this one. You need to end on a little bit of a positive note here. Feel like you've got some momentum going into the off day. So to me, it starts with Rich Hill, Chris. He actually has been good. It feels weird to say about somebody who has a 4.5 ERA, but when he doesn't leave curveballs up in the zone, when he's executing pitches, and it's basically, it was some sporadic misses in his last start, and then his first 2 starts were bad. Other than that, I mean, he has been pretty good. So keep the ball down, pitch the way he knows how, uses defenders. I'm not telling him he does anything he doesn't know, but they do really need something from Rich today.
We'll see if they get it. And then, of course, they head on the road for back-to-back series. The Orioles, like you said, with this series starting on Friday, the Orioles, they've been pretty doggone good. They'd be in first place in the AL East if it wasn't for the red-hot Rays and how great they've been. What's the biggest thing they got to focus on to play against one of the better teams in baseball record-wise right now?
Yeah, I know, right? I was talking to somebody yesterday about their lineup, and somebody said, don't they have like an elite second baseman? I'm like, who, Adam Frazier? So in all seriousness, it's a really good team. It's a really good team. Like Adam Frazier is just one small part, but I mean, they hit the crap out of the ball, Chris. I don't think, I look at their lineup and I don't see an Aaron Judge or a Shohei Ohtani, and it really doesn't matter. Like they're producing. They're really good. Santander, Ryan Mountcastle, Urias, Adley Rutschman. Anyway, they've got guys. Kyle Gibson has been good for them. So I look at them as the way the Pirates were playing, as the way the Rays have played the entire year. Like they do everything right. They're going to get quality starting pitching. Their bullpen has been good. They're going to get production up and down the lineup. It doesn't, they don't necessarily have like huge high earners. They certainly have good players, but they're just, I don't know. They're one of those teams that can beat you a lot of different ways.
I agree. They're one of those teams that find different ways to win, and that was the very factor that I thought the Pirates had on their side throughout April. They beat you with great starting pitching, bullpen pitching, and hitting, and base running. But we'll see if the Pirates can get at least some of those aspects back. He's Jason Mackey. Again, the Pirates' first pitch against the Rockies in their finale here on the homestand, 12:35 at PNC Park. Then they're on the road for 3 games against the Orioles and then 2 games against the Detroit Tigers. He's Jason Mackey. He'll keep us up to date with all of that here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thanks again to Jason, and thanks again to Ray for joining us and talking Steelers. Thanks to you for joining us here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Check out all of our content at post-gazette.com and get all of our podcasts, whether it's the North Shore Drive podcast at Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or all of the daily content we produce here every day. You can find it on your favorite podcasting app, and especially on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to this channel for all of the Post-Gazette content. Back Friday, talking NFL schedule, rookie camp, and seeing how the Pirates are doing with their start of their series against the Orioles. We'll see you then right here on the North Shore Drive podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you're watching this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down below in the description.